can't even imagine how this must have been. After reading that timeline, it's obvious that you were under tremendous stress. There was a lot of violence and threats going on very early. How concerned were you early on about the safety of your officers, given what we'd seen happen when the police station burned down in Minneapolis and some other peace rallies that began peacefully, and at some point during the night, things turned bad? What precautions had you taken early on to protect your officers and to protect the city?
Thank you. And that truly was our concern, is the safety of the city and the safety of the officers and all of the staff. So early on, we reached out to our partners, the San Diego Sheriff's Department. They are the mutual aid coordinators for our county. I believe San Diego is the second largest county in California, if I remember correctly. But so they're the mutual aid coordinators, and before the event started, in fact, if I recall, 2 days before the event started, we started reaching out with the planning process because we saw so many cities just experience some very violent protests that resulted, as you mentioned earlier, in police stations being burnt down. And so we started planning 2 days before and checking on and requesting resources to assist us just in case it reached a point where it turned into a riot.
Yes. The woman that was struck in the head, you indicated that she was throwing a rock, or at least your timeline indicated she was throwing a rock. Do you have independent video surveillance video that confirms that? And do you know, was the officer aiming for her head, or was he aiming elsewhere, and in the chaos, that's what happened?
During the review that's going on right now, we're reviewing all video, both from the exterior of the police department and also the video cameras on the officers, the body-worn cameras, and we're still reviewing. We started that investigation and review that morning, Sunday morning. Yes, I mean, we, again, continue to review that information. The officer, as per our training, the target area when we use less lethal munitions is actually the lower torso or stomach area. That's the primary target area. It is not the head.
Right. Yeah, we had a photographer who was hit in the chest also with pepper spray.
Okay.
So to what degree does sometimes when you are in an emergency situation that sometimes a firearm will just go off? And also, what precautions does a law enforcement officer have to have that not happen?
Yeah, exactly. And that comes down to the training that is constantly instilled in the officers, whether it be the initial training or subsequent trainings. In that case, as mentioned, the officers are very skilled in regards to, or trained in that manner, where once they see the threat, when the object was thrown at the deputies and officers, at that point, then they had to fire the less lethal at the individual.
I would like to talk about the fires, which I think was the most serious concern of the night. There was certainly a real risk that we could have lost more than the 3 buildings that burned with spot fires all over and everything. But a lot of people are asking, we know it was dangerous, but why weren't there more outside fire agencies coming in, maybe some kind of aerial support to douse these fires? There were still embers that flared up. I was watching at 4 a.m. that came very close to trees. Why did that happen? What could be better done in the future, just to, if God forbid something like this ever happens again? Was CAL FIRE contacted? Can you tell me what was going on?
Those are great questions. The after action report and the thorough review and analysis of what occurred will occur, or will happen. And from that report, obviously we will partner with our public safety partners, the fire department. And then we'll have lessons learned, and we will continue to analyze that information to see how exactly we can improve and change our tactics. Unfortunately, in that circumstance with the fires, still at that point with the resources that we had, and still with the attacks that were occurring and the violent acts and the violence throughout the city, we could not safely get the fire department to those locations.
And they had, I understand, a fire truck and a battalion chief vehicle both had burned already,
That's correct. We did have one of the battalion chief's vehicles burned.
but not a fire truck? There was a report of it in the radio.
It was one of the fire pickups, one of their vehicles.
Okay,
I think
not an engine.
from the chief.
There were also rumors on social media. Were there any threats, or for that matter, findings of things like, bombs or booby trapping of these buildings that might have prevented, firefighters from going into it?
I'm not aware of those being found.
Okay.
Now, is because we are dealing here with banks, and so is the Secret Service and the FBI also investigating on what happened at the banks?
I think at the federal level, yes, since it was banks that were burned, destroyed, it would go to a federal level in regards to also looking at those arson instances.
Yeah, I know the FBI has asked for tips from the public too.
Yes, sir.
How many arrests, if any, were made the night of the protest and up through early the next morning in La Mesa?
At this point, we have the night of the occurrence and in the morning, we made 7 arrests.
Okay.
And then since that incident, we've made 2 additional arrests due to the help and tips and information from the public.
That's good to know.
Sorry, guys, we have to move on.
Sometimes when there's large protests, that I've seen in other places, they would pre-position, buses so that they needed to do mass arrests of protesters who were wanting to do civil disobedience. They could do that and kind of get them out of there. Was there any thought ahead of time to doing that, or if this were to happen again, do you think something like that might be something to look at? Recognizing that I know it's difficult when you're having rocks thrown at you. But...
Right. No, I understand. And actually, at the staging area or command post, that was set up with that vehicle if we entered into a situation where we had to make mass arrests. So that was already in place.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked why weren't there some arrests made after they announced we're going to arrest people if you don't leave, and then instead it was the pepper spraying or the tear gas or whatever.
Right. Yeah. After at that point, we just didn't have the resources due to the fact that the officers that were on scene around the police station immediately, again, as we mentioned even before the unlawful assembly announcements, the notice to disperse, they were already taking rocks and bottles, and they were just under siege at that point from multiple locations, from multiple individuals. Eventually, we did have at least 2 Molotov cocktails thrown at the station to try to set it on fire.
Now, one of the questions I'd like to ask.
This is the last question, yes, sir.
One of the questions I would like to ask is, okay.
Well, I definitely do want to ask about the Amory Johnson situation, and what is, I know that they've decided not to file charges against the young man.
Yes, ma'am.
What further is the police department going to do to try to sort of heal the relations, the racial relations in the community, not only with the Amory Johnson situation and seeing accountability, making sure the officer is held accountable if it's found that he, did not behave appropriately, but beyond that, to try to, reach out and see what can be done to heal this anger by some in the community of what they perceive as racial injustice in police departments across the country, and specifically a couple of incidents that occurred in La Mesa.
That is definitely part of the healing process, without a doubt in my mind. The outreach has already started. I've had organizations reaching out to me. The chiefs and sheriffs are already talking about improvement and changes and connections and partnerships and working together. As we progress through this and move forward and start that healing, those types of outreach and those changes will occur without a doubt.
I'd like to jump in with, I would like to jump in with my one question. I want to ask my one question about the situation at the Vons. So what was the timeline from the time that you learned about the situation at the Vons, did you start to respond to the? When did they contact you?
When the situation at Vaughan started to occur, that's when the incident commanders and those working for the safety of the citizens started to request more resources and trying to figure out exactly how to get them into the scene. When the resources did arrive, at certain points, they could not get into the Vons due to either a burning vehicle, or at certain points when the police vehicles would come down the road, they would be hit by a barrage of rocks and bottles, and so they would have to detour around it. So it took us some time to get into that area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Who do we follow up on to ask about what happened after your timeline ends, after 3 of you?
Rungy will be your contact.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Runge
Okay.
will definitely answer the questions that you
Thank
have
you
on
Thank
on
you.
that part. I know our time is short,